All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sen. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to be, I guess, the moderator type human for the teach-in. So just going to go through the schedule a bit. So we're going to do the introduction and the grounding, which, excuse me, so about the historical context of Palestine and the West Bank. There'll be initial questions, discussion about the work that was done in the West Bank, everyday realities in the West Bank today. There will be a video that will be watched. How long is it, Taylor?
About 15 minutes.
About 15 minutes. Then we'll do a break and then reporting back / connections to the US. So just a couple housekeeping and ground rules. Were you supposed to read that? No, that's me. Okay. Wyoming for Palestine. We are a coalition of Wyomingites from Cheyenne to Jackson, Lander to Casper, with identities ranging from Muslim, Arab, Jewish, Indigenous, Black, Christian, LGBTQIA to S plus folks who have experienced the systemic abuses of the U.S. prisons / immigration systems, and allies, standing together in solidarity against the murder and ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people. This will be recorded. So a recording will pause during question periods. Please only go off mute during the question portion. We will mute and or remove you from the meeting if not. I repeat, please only go off mute during the question portion. We will mute and or remove you from the meeting if not. In the chat, introduce yourself and say why you are here. Please do stay respectful, and we do have a volunteer who will be monitoring the chat.
So it is an honor to be asked to speak tonight. My name is Camila Spunater. I am Arapaho, Shoshone, and Lakota, and I'm proud to represent people that through resiliency and survival are still here today. As Indigenous people, our history is interconnected with our relatives in Palestine. We both are facing the impacts of colonization and trauma that is both historical and generational. The removal of people from their homeland through use of military force is a human rights violation and also is an act of genocide. Regardless of what the administration or those in power say, what is occurring in Palestine is the definition of genocide and does meet what the United Nations Tribunal defines genocide as. Many similarities align with what occurred in the United States, such as the killings of innocent men, women, and children. In 1864 at Sand Creek and in 1890 at Wounded Knee, our ancestors from the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Lakota were massacred simply because of colonial policy called manifest destiny. The perspectives today is that Israel is the chosen land of the Christian. Today, therefore, they are continuing the premise of manifest destiny in Palestine. I am Arapaho and Shoshone and Lakota. My ties go both to Wounded Knee and to Sand Creek. Tonight, you will hear from two amazing warriors who went to the front lines to stand strong with the Palestinian people. Their stories are ones of resilience and bravery. We must not stay silent. That is what the oppressors want. But as we see across this nation, in almost every college campus, a revolution is happening. Thank you.
I'm really ecstatic and excited to introduce our speakers tonight, which are Dee and Taylor. From late March to May, 2 Wyoming for Palestine members were in the West Bank with a Palestinian-led group based in nonviolence, anti-oppression, and consensus building. The tactics included direct action, nonviolence, international documentation, relationship building, and solidarity.
So real quick, we'll just introduce ourselves. I am Dee. I am a member of Wyoming for Palestine, and I went to the West Bank from about the end of April to the third week of May.
Sweet. And I'm Taylor. I was in Palestine um, during the month of, or at the end. Wait, when was this time? I was
April,
there
mostly,
during,
right?
yes, April. It feels like it was just yesterday. Um, but yeah, a little bit more of an introduction about uh, me and Dee, uh, and Wyoming for Palestine. We have membership organizations throughout the state. I'm with Fremont County for Ceasefire Now, which is based primarily in Lander, which is a border town to the Wind River Reservation, home of the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho. And we'll be talking quite a bit about the context of Wyoming. We'll also be talking about Arizona, but we just want to have folks think about just wherever you are in this world and your relationship to settler colonization. Both Dee and I are settlers, so white settlers. So we do want to name this dynamic as we present. Also, something that I've been wanting to share every chance I get, in just for context where we live. So Lander, where I live, is a border town to the Wind River Reservation, as I mentioned. Somehow it was, quote, like legally bought for like $25,000. We can talk about what legality means, but right next door is Riverton, which is another border town, and this was officially stolen in 2017 through a court case. So settler colonization is still happening right here, directly in Wyoming.
And I'll just add that I am in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which are the occupied lands of the Cheyenne and Arapaho peoples. I do not know as much about the history of the area I live in as Taylor does, but I do know that I am a settler on stolen lands.
So this first part that we're going to do is just about the context. This is pretty lengthy, but we've done two teach-ins so far, and we've gone back and forth about how we want to include just the longer history, and it just feels wrong to not have this more background knowledge. So this will feel a bit much. So we're glad this is being recorded so people can look back on it. So with that, we just wanted to get into just the where Zionism comes from and just the idea of Zionism as a political project. Palestine, a Socialist Introduction, is a really helpful book and provides the majority of this context that I'm about to share with you all. But also, if you have your phone and want to take a little scan of this QR code, it gives you a much broader and comprehensive timeline. But overall, in the 1880s, there was just an increase in anti-Jewish policy, rhetoric, and actions in Eastern Europe, eventually in Western Europe, which caused many Jewish folks to flee. And also, this caused many Jewish folks on all over the political spectrum to create different modes of resistance. On the far right, Austrian Theodor Herzl wrote The State of the Jews, which was pretty much the grounding and the groundwork for political Zionism, which is the goal of a Jewish-only state. In this, he talked about the various places that this so-called Jewish-only state would be. It's important to note that Palestine was not the first place that he looked at. He looked at Uganda, Cyprus, Argentina, and even Ohio in the United States. So eventually he and followers chose Palestine because they knew that in order to create a Jewish-only state, they had to have international backing. And with that sympathy for Jewish folks in the area has that ties to religion and religious symbolism. So that felt to be the most strategic. That being said, it was also deeply intertwined with rhetoric around civilizing the lands of Palestine against the barbarous indigenous people. So very deeply entrenched with racism. So that all being said, here is just kind of a more recent timeline. But before we name that, for time immemorial, so forever, there have been diverse groups of people in the area of Palestine, people of different cultures, religions, ethnicities, which we'll talk about because we did encounter and talk with and build community and relations with Palestinians who are Christian, Jewish, Muslim. But really, so Zionism, we mentioned, started in the late 19th century, but it really got backing by the international stage in like the 1917 around World War I, backed by the British. So this led to Mandate Palestine, which proclaimed that the British had control of the area, and then ultimately dividing Palestine into an Arab and Jewish state, which led to the Nakba, the catastrophe. This was a mass slaughter and of Palestinians for Israeli sovereignty or so-called sovereignty, and the United States ultimately joined in on this support around this time to back the state of Israel. Something before we go on that I want to name, back in the 1890s, when the roots of Zionism were starting, I think in this presentation, we really do want to call out the international powers that were a part of this. So the United States and British folks and the British imperial powers. A lot of this is their fault, like as much as Israel has been on this, like there still needs to be actual true reparations for Jewish folks who were persecuted back in the 1890s. Like this is direct causal relationship between then and now. But anyway, so all that being said, the Nakba, it happened, and people resisted, Palestinians resisted. This led to multiple resistant organizations, such as the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the Six-Day War, in which Israel gained even more control. And then I also wanted to share just some examples about how these international powers viewed the idea of Israel. So these are all quotes on the right. That old looking thing is the Balfour Declaration, very short, but the British declaration of support for the state of Israel. The quote on the bottom left is President Truman of the United States officially declaring support during the Nakba and of the state of Israel. And then just documented evidence and of Israelis. So Ben-Gurion, the first Israeli prime minister, sharing the goal of ethnic cleansing. So it's all right there. It doesn't take a whole lot of research to see the evidence that has been a part of the creation of Israel as an ethnic state based on the expulsion of Palestinians. And we wanted to share these videos to show how, no matter what the political party is in the United States, the left or the right, there has always been support of Israel for political gain and to protect the so-called interests of the United States. So this video right here, I'm only going to play a few seconds of it, but this is Biden back in his back in the day.
It's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel. Second.
Yeah, so that's Joe Biden's, his first initial thoughts. Up until now, we're seeing complete support for Israel. And then also Trump, during his presidency, did a whole lot, like in terms of expanding the border wall in the West Bank, which we'll talk about. And he also moved the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to the West Bank, which is a breach on sovereignty because of the political context of the West Bank, which we will explain is Palestinian run, not run by Israel. And then this is a quote from Trump just a few months ago that is pretty much getting at Benjamin Netanyahu for being slow in this genocide. He said, they need to finish what they started and get it over with fast, because Israel is losing the PR war. So yeah, this is really just to show it doesn't matter what the political party is, there's always been unconditional support for Israel. So as we mentioned, the Nakba led to various resistant movements, such as the PLO. There's also Hamas was founded, and there was the first Intifada, which is the Palestinian uprising, second Intifada. There was also the so-called peace process, which normalized the idea of a two-state solution, and led also to the creation of the Palestinian Authority. This peace process was done in the United States at the White House, so not in conjunction with like Palestinians on the ground, which continued to lead to more resistance. This resistance also was coupled with the construction of a 472-mile apartheid wall in the West Bank, based directly off of the United States-Mexico border. The divide in the West Bank and Gaza political leadership, with Gaza being under the political leadership of Hamas, the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority, Palestine gaining non-member observer state status in the United Nations, so just complete breaches of sovereignty. And yeah, as I mentioned too, Trump putting the American embassy in Jerusalem, or in Jerusalem in the West Bank. So all of this happened before October 8th, because as we know, none of this violence started on October 7th.
Just some visuals for everybody as far as like timeline and land loss. So if you look to the left, 1917, this was British Mandate Palestine. So this was the Balfour Declaration that basically declared Palestine as British controlled, but technically it was still Palestinian controlled, so all the land was Palestinian controlled still. It was when the Haganah, which then turned into the IOF, ethnically cleansed 700,000 to 1 million Palestinians, destroyed, I believe it was about over 40 different villages, and killed around 50,000 people, I believe. And then June 1967 to 1993, this is when there was a change in Israeli military control of the West Bank and Gaza. And then 1994 to 2020, this is where the Palestinian control and Israeli control looked like as far as land loss. And then just for folks in Wyoming, but also if you I mean know the size of Wyoming by looking at a map, just to kind of give a visual of um, the dimensions, the spatial dimensions of Palestine. So if you see on the left here, um, all the blue is Palestine. Obviously, the pink is the West Bank and Gaza. And you can see how little of Wyoming Palestine takes up. It is a very small area, and then the West Bank is even smaller. So if you look to the right, the West Bank and Gaza spatially on the map of Wyoming and Inlander and Riverton, Gaza is basically and I believe it's about 30 miles, right, between Lander and Riverton. So if you look at that and the space of Gaza and then the West Bank, very small area. So these are some other visuals of specifically the West Bank, and then Masaferriata, which is where Taylor and I were doing protective presence work. So if you look on the left, this shows the areas of the West Bank. And so the West Bank is divided into 3 different areas of control. Area A is the light gray, and that's 18% of the West Bank, and that's administered by the Palestinian Authority. So an example of a city that is in that area is Ramallah. So Ramallah is in Area A. It's administered by the Palestinian Authority. But as people know, even places that are administered by the Palestinian Authority are constantly under attack by the IOF and settlers. Just recently, about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, the entire vegetable market in Ramallah was burnt down by the IOF because they said there was someone in there, I think like a banking institution or whatever. And so they burned down the whole vegetable mart, which they're rebuilding now. But that just kind of shows how like even these areas in the light gray that are Palestinian controlled are still under attack from the IOF every single day. And then if you look at the like dark blue, dark gray area, that's area B. And so area B is 22% administered by both the Palestinian Authority and Israel. And then area C, which is the biggest area of control in the West Bank. 60% of the West Bank is under Area C, and this is completely under the control of the Israeli military. So this is where Masaferriata is, and many of the places that we do protective presence work in, because although all of this land is Palestinian, it's completely under the control of the military, and at any time they can say that it is a closed military zone or a firing zone, which is how they get away with, well, yeah, they get away with it. There are a lot of legal cases that are being tried right now by a lot of Israeli and Palestinian lawyers who are trying to actually change this. But obviously we know they're under constant attack in these areas, and that's where we do most of our protective presence work. If you look under the little pie chart, this is a map of the Masaferriata area, which is a whole area of the southern, so it's basically underneath Hebron or El Khalil, and it's in the South El Khalil hills, and it encompasses an area of many, many different villages. There is a bigger town there called Yatta, but this is the main area that we were placed in. And then if you look at the right-hand side, this is a visual of basically like how the firing zones are separated. So in the settlement areas, if you look at the top, there is 39% of the West Bank are, and this is outdated as well, so it's probably much bigger, but are areas where settlements or outposts have been, basically Palestinian land has been stolen. And then down here where it says closed military areas, including firing zones, that is 20% of the West Bank. And often, even those settlements or outposts that are stolen Palestinian land by Israeli settlers are in these firing zones. So even under Israeli law, the settlements are illegal. And so you can just kind of see the way that land is taken there. This is a sign that you would see everywhere, that we would see everywhere. So basically it says in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, this road leads to Area A under the Palestinian Authority. The entrance for Israeli citizens is forbidden, dangerous to your lives, and is also against the Israeli law. So anywhere that was going into Palestinian Authority controlled area, you would see these signs. And then also if it was in an area that Palestinians weren't allowed to go into, you would see signs that would be telling Palestinians it is illegal to enter this area.
Yeah, so what you really just talked about is this blatant apartheid segregation like nation that is Israel. I think it's like there's this disconnect in like Western media that wants to get at this idea that no, it's not an apartheid state, but it's like that's just such a Western talking point because that was never even like shared at all. Like when we were in the other city, like in the bigger cities, we would never hear anything about like Israel being so awesome that because it's all together there. And you just see these signs everywhere, these fear-mongering signs that just create fear of the other. But so overall, we are really wanting to talk about the West Bank because we think it's a really helpful introduction into really just how Israel continues to exert military supremacy over the area, and how it's been doing it for decades. Since October 7th, international attention has been focused on Gaza, which that is where it should be for sure, as it's being indiscriminately bombed, and the genocide is just so massive and in your face. So we don't want to take any attention away from that, but Western media outlets are just fueling all of this hate on people in Gaza, placing the full blame on Hamas. And by doing that, they're really diverting attention away from the bigger picture of Palestinian oppression, and why people would resist in the first place. And so if we look at the West Bank, you see the realities, the everyday slow genocide that just it's a slow death, a slow, insidious form of systematic oppression. And totally goes against every Western media talking point about like, oh, Hamas is the one doing it. It's all these extremists. The West Bank isn't even under the political authority or jurisdiction of Hamas. As we've been mentioning, it's the Palestinian Authority. And we're not here to condemn Hamas or literally any type of resistance movement or political organization that's Palestinian run. But we're just like trying to demonstrate that no matter the leadership or the tactics, nonviolent or violent, by Palestinians, there is always going to be state-sanctioned violence that is supported and backed by international powers to continue this, whether it be slow or fast genocide of Palestinians. And to further this point of this long-term genocide of Palestinians, these are two also outdated now graphs that just kind of show the deaths and injuries of Palestinians versus Israelis, to just show the disparities in death from decades ago to 2020. On the left is to 2020, on the right is to 2023. Just truly, and obviously these are going to be underreported anyway. So this idea, I know, I can imagine that a lot of people here on the recording or Zoom recognize that this isn't a conflict. This is a genocide, but really trying to put that as our grounding as we share further.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the area that we were in, Taylor and I were in, is called Masaferyata. This area is indigenous Palestinian land for time immemorial, which means forever. And most of the families there are shepherds and have sheep and goats, and that is their main livelihood. And then many of the people grow olive trees and almonds. There's also some farming of tobacco and barley and wheat as well. And so this area has been increasing in illegal Israeli settlements and outposts, which we'll talk about the difference of later. Well, no, actually, we'll talk about it now. So this area has been increasing in these illegal Israeli settlements and outposts for a while now. And outposts basically are mini houses or like mini settlements. Usually it starts with a RV or a bus or like a little like canopy, basically just to claim land. Usually that is put in an area kind of close to a settlement to kind of create a like connect the dots between the settlements and the outposts. And then Israeli flags are posted in, you know, a blatant display of like claiming the land. These outposts aren't actually officially recognized by the Israeli government, but are continuously supported by the Israeli military, so are supported by the Israeli government. So basically what happens between these areas is a settlement, and then an outpost is created. And then between that area is all of this Palestinian farmland or grazing land. But because that land is now in between an outpost and a settlement, Palestinians are not allowed to go, aren't allowed to have that freedom of movement between that area. And they're not allowed to like graze their sheep on areas where they've grazed their sheep and goats for hundreds of years. So there is in all the settlements and outposts, there is like security. And so the people that are tasked with the security of these illegal settlements and outposts are settlers, usually teenagers to about 25 years old. They are given rifles, so usually like M16s or ARs, which are either semi-automatic or automatic rifles, and they are given those by the military. to do their security work, which entails harassment and violence of Palestinians to make it so unlivable that they leave their land. They also are usually given a stipend by the government, and even though they are not active military, they usually look like they are soldiers, so they wear like military surplus clothing, and sometimes are kind of hard to distinguish between them and IOF. Yeah, and so because of this increase in settler violence and because of this increase in settlements and outposts in the area, Palestinians have requested for internationals to come and stay with them, to accompany them while shepherding, to accompany them while, harvesting their wheat and barley, accompany them during olive harvest season, which is in the fall, when they're harvesting their olives, because the main goal of this harassment and violence by the Israeli settlers is to push them off their land. So of course they're going to target them in times that are connected to their livelihood and making the money they need to survive. So that is mainly the work that we do, and what Protective Presence is accompanying families and also documenting abuses when we see them.
Well, and one thing I wanted to add too is that while this is also, these outposts are illegal under Israeli law, technically, all Israeli settlements and settler outposts are illegal under international law because it's an occupied territory.
Yes. And I'll add too that since October 7th, I don't know if we have this statistic in our slides, I can't remember, but since October 7th, 18 villages in this area, not just in Massafaryata, but in all of the West Bank Area C, have been ethnically cleansed, which means they have been so harassed, so their livelihoods destroyed, so much violence against them that they have left their villages because that's the only thing that they know to do left. So some visuals here of an outpost. If you look on the left-hand side, this bus right here where it's pointing to the settler outpost, that is kind of how they claimed the land there and declared it an outpost. And you can see how close it is to this Palestinian home. And so basically, on the other side of that outpost, there are more Palestinian homes, but because that outpost is there, a trip from this Palestinian home, which took 10 minutes to walk to, is now like an hour trip because they have to go around on the Palestinian roads. They can't use the settler roads, and they have to go all the way around to reach the other side. So you can kind of just see how apartheid in the West Bank visually and obviously logistically impedes Palestinian freedom of movement all over the place. And then as you see on the right-hand side, this slide is a Palestinian road that has been destroyed, so completely bulldozed the entire middle chunk of this road out. So there's no way for a car to get across there. And so then Palestinians have to either walk or they have to go all the way around on other Palestinian roads, and again, cannot drive on settler roads at all, and is very dangerous to do so. So a little bit more about settler violence. So again, I spoke to that were accompanying shepherds. Also in other daily activities, like while I was there, one of the families I was with was harvesting all of their barley for the feed for their sheep and goats. And so we were with them during that time. Several of the families request accompaniment during the night because often there are surprise raids, which include settlers and military sometimes just settlers. This story is actually Taylor's, so I'll let Taylor tell this story, but I did want to tell a story of the family that I stayed with that that I got the closest to and was with for a majority of the time that we were there. So after October 7th, this family, and at this time, this family was not getting like international protective presence. They didn't have activists at their house. This was the basically the catalyst for them to request this kind of accompaniment. But shortly after October 7th, this family of 9, they have 7 kids, mom and dad. Dad is a shepherd, and dad was out shepherding a sheep by himself. I think he might have had one of his kids with him, maybe the 11-year-old. And a settler came in his military fatigues, and he said, if you don't leave your land, we're going to kill all of your children. He knew how many children this man had too. He said, we're going to kill all of your 7 children, just like we're killing the children in Gaza. So the dad said, I'm not going to leave my land. And also, my family's lives, my children's lives are not worth more than the kids you're killing in Gaza. So the next day, the settler came back, harassed him some more, told him some of the same things, and then left. And the third day, he came, and this kind of, shows what happens during the night sometimes. He came to their home after the dad was done shepherding for the day. So the sheep were back and he was back, and all the kids were in the house, and his wife was there. And he came with a couple other settlers. He started beating up the father with his rifle. He actually threw him under a blanket and started beating him up. The mom started recording with her phone. They took her phone and broke it. They took the dad's phone and broke it. They broke all of their lights. They cut their gas. They cut their electricity. They took a knife and stabbed their water tank. If you saw on the slide before, all Palestinian homes have like a water tank for their water storage outside of their house. And they stabbed that, so all of their water was gone. They broke open all the sheep's feed, so then all the feed was all over the ground and couldn't be used. They stole money from the family, and then they pointed their semi-automatics at the 3- and 4-year-old girls. After this happened, the military came back and arrested the father because the settler who had been harassing him every day told the military that this man was threatening his life. So then he ended up being in an IOF jail for 10 days without the ability to take care of his family. And then he had to pay 3,000 shekels, which is about $1,000 to get out. And now he is banned from going to different parts of the West Bank, depending on the area that they're in. He's banned from going to Jordan. He's banned from going anywhere in 48, or what people call Israel. And this was then when this family asked for accompaniment. Side note, since we left and there hasn't been as many volunteers there now. Actually, right now there are a lot more volunteers, but for a couple of weeks after we left, there weren't very many volunteers. And there's drone surveillance everywhere, which Taylor will talk about in a little bit as well. But since there haven't been international activists with this family every day, the days that there aren't international activists, the same settler who did all of this to this family drives by their house morning and night, just to intimidate and harass them. So that kind of also shows the surveillance and how they actually know when there aren't activists with the Palestinian families they are trying to push out.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that story. That's just so real of what the settlers come up to you and say. Another point we want to get across too is the age of the settlers who commit a lot of this violence. Dee had more encounters with adult settlers. I had 0 encounters with adult settlers. Every settler that I was next to or encountered was around 16, if I had to guess. And it really is just like a complete indoctrination from birth to just do this violencing. The last night that I was on the ground, some settler teenagers lit the last working car of a Palestinian family members, lit it on fire. And their old car that was previously lit on fire is still in the yard. So yeah, just they're both there. And another story is, so the Iran missile attack, definitely more of a retaliation than attack. That night it happened, and I remember going to sleep and seeing all these Instagram videos of people in Tel Aviv, of settlers in Tel Aviv, like fearing for their lives, screaming, like mass chaos. And the family I was with, they were very calm throughout the whole thing and just kind of like, yeah, it's happening. At least we're getting it international attention right now. But then we woke up in the morning and they still had the routine everyday violence and harassment of having their settler teenager come over with he was a shepherd as well, and every morning he would bring his sheep over to the house and just sit there. So they sent him out that morning after the missiles, and then they had later that day they had a huge party of settlers come over to an outpost, and I was like, what are they doing? And it was explained to me this is a land grab party. It's when they go to a settlement, and they go to the settlement, or they go to an outpost, and they have this party. They invite people from other settlements, and then they demand official recognition from the Israeli military. So it was just so wild and strategic that they did it after the Iran missiles. But truly what we were seeing on the media of just like complete fear was not the reality of what was actually happening then on the ground and how Israelis were reacting to it. So these are just some pictures of, so teenagers usually have like an ATV or a dirt bike that they just drive around in circles. This one, you can't really see it, but it has the Israeli flag on the back. This is a picture on the right, a picture of a police. So there's the Israeli police that were actually the people that, ironically, somehow would de-escalate the situation from settlers. It's still baseline violence, but they were at least better than the IOF. And then on the left of the police truck, you can see that this guy is wearing military-looking like outfits, but that is an example of a settler like disguised as a soldier. And once you like start to see them next to a soldier, you start to see how different they are. But there's just this like such a like idea that really anyone can take on this military role, whether or not they're in like the official security team of the settlement. So these two videos, let Chris actually explain these two videos. I'll play them first.
Fish to go.
So both of these videos happened while I was on the ground. I was not present for either of them, but my comrades were present for different comrades were present for the first one, and different ones were present for the second one. But this first one that you just saw, these three young men who probably are 17, maybe 18, are invading a Palestinian home. This is a home that we would do accompaniment at very often because they're the only home still left in this village that hasn't like evacuated because of the violence. And it's also the same home where all their cars were burned, where Taylor saw the car being burned on the last night. And if people know Arabic, these Israeli teens, settler teens, came into this home, demanded coffee in Arabic, went into each of the rooms, just like invading. And then at the end of this situation, which I believe was about like half an hour, 45 minutes to like an hour, they sat on this family's couch, put their feet on the couch, and just sat there invading the home. And I want everybody to think about what would happen if somebody you didn't know who was already aggressive, already burnt down your car, already ruined all of your grape vines, already like hurt your livestock, harassed your children. If they had done this in a home in the US, especially a stand your ground state, what would have happened? And then we'll watch the second one. So in this video, this was also during the time I was there. This day, 2 Palestinian homes were demolished. This home where these children are, and the border police, who are the law enforcement there. This home was in the village that we spent a lot of time in. These children's home, so obviously they're upset that their home is about to be destroyed. And this border police that you see at the end, like going after the child, actually physically hits him. And they were saying things a lot of we work with Israeli anti-Zionist activists on the ground there. There are several of them that we work with, several groups, I mean. And there were several Israelis there who were actually translating what the border police were saying, and they were saying, calling the children dumb, calling them the R word, which I hope everybody knows what that means. Like, basically, like being super ableist and talking about how stupid Palestinians are, and was a really, really abusive situation. And then they continued to bulldoze these children's house down. Something that people don't know about the West Bank, especially the places in Area C, is that a lot of Palestinian homes are actually slated to be demolished at any time, because of certain laws that they make up around permits. And so most Palestinians know that their house could be bulldozed at any time. They just don't know when.
So we're just going to play this video. This is a video on Instagram. It's compiled footage of activists on the ground.
החוק הבינלאומי על הזיפי שלי. הנכבה שהייתה ב-48, זה כלום לעומת הנכבה שתהיה פה השנה הבאה. יאללה, דף. I win, you lose again. انت تعالى اصلي البحر شام.
So yeah, my second day, I was detained with a Palestinian family. We went out shepherding. We were about like 200 meters from the house, the Palestinian house, which also happened to be about 200 meters from the settlement road. And we were out there for hours. It was such a beautiful day. I got really close with the family. It was a young woman, who's 18 now, I believe, or 17. And yeah, and then all of a sudden some drones came. We were like, okay, it's time to go back inside. And we look back and it's these teenagers flying this drone. They come straight to our heads. I'll play this video of what it kind of looked like. Yeah, so we got back to the house. The drones came into like the patio area of the house. And then we saw the military, about 12 soldiers come. We see them walking down. It's like a slow walk down to the house. At this point, I wasn't able to tell the difference between soldiers and settlers dressing up as soldiers, but it was about half and half. And then we were detained. They had me get on the ground, and the person who had me get on the ground ended up being since I was taking a video, I was able to show some of the families their face, and they explained, they're like, oh, this guy, he is the leader of the settlement security. He was recruited from a different country to come lead the security force of the settlement. He supposedly has some like history of aggression and bullying in his home country. So he was recruited not to join the IOF, because he was a little too hard to control. But he was more of the like prime candidate to be a part of the settlement security because he doesn't have to be controlled like the IOF soldiers. So it really just goes to show that like the settlers are being tasked with doing the like dirty work of Israel to lead the expansion projects, so that like the Israeli government isn't taking the fall. It's the settlers, but they're still backed by the IOF, which we could see that was just so prominent once I was out of the situation to be like, oh, okay, half of those people there were not even like official soldiers. They were just settlers. And then this is a picture of the fire-destroyed truck from a few months before this one was caught on fire by the teenagers. And then here are the pictures of the bulldozed homes that Carissa was talking about. And we can watch as this man, Palestinian man, recites a call to prayer.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
So as you can see, these were the two houses bulldozed on the same day. The one on the left where the man is praying was the first one, and this one on the right is the second one where the border police were harassing the children in the video earlier. And yeah, there's really no more to say. And then this is a portion of a recording that one of my comrades was able to get with explicit consent from the family. This is the mother of the family that both the teenagers invaded their house in the video earlier, and then also the family where all their cars were burned down. So this is the family that is the only house left in this village. Everyone else has been run off with the constant harassment and violence. And this is her explaining some of the stuff that happened after October 7th.
سائل عما إذا كان بإمكانك التحدث قليلاً عن كيفية تصعيد المستوطنين وزيادة الأمور سوءاً بالنسبة لك منذ 7 أكتوبر. هل يمكن أن تخبرني عما حدث مع بئرك؟
في 19 أكتوبر أجوا المستوطنين علينا هنا، كسروا الدار، كسروا حمام الشمسي، كسروا حظير الغنم، ضربوا جوزي وكسروا له 3 ضليع، قتلوا مهند وكسروا كتفه، قلعوا الشجر، قلعوا الزيتون، قصوا الشيك، كتلوا الدجاج، كتلوا الحمام، كتلوا الوز، قصوا الدوالي، قصوا الزيتون، لوزيات، حمضيات، ليمون، زيتون، خوخ، مشمش، كرز، برقوق، دوالي، كل انواع الشجر عندنا كانت مثمرة وكلها قصوها. سخانات مي اللي من ملي منهن من البير وبعطين الدار، سطحوا 4 سخانات، سرقوا 2 و2 هيهن موجودات ومسطحات. اجوا عبير المي، اول مرة داروا فيه سم وفحصناه وطلع فيه المي مسمومة، نحضناها وكبناه. والمرة الثانية اجوا كبوا فيه زيت محروق، زيت سيارات، وسولر، وكسروا مضخات المي، 2 سرقوهن و2 كسروهن، وسرقوا مواتير بنزين اللي كنا نسحب فيهن من البير نعطي عتنك التراكتر، سرقوهن، حرقوا لنا السيارة أول مرة وثاني مرة وثالث مرة. في أول رمضان حرقوها، في نص رمضان حرقوها، وقبل شهر حرقوها حرق كامل. أجوا علينا هين على الدار، قالوا لنا إذا بتظلوا نايمين في الدار، إذا بتكوش تطلعوا من الدار بنيجي بنفجر الدار وانتوا نايمين فيها، أو بنحرقكم وانتوا نايمين، ممنوع تسكنوا هين. بزرع خضرة، بزرع فقوس، زرعت كوسة، زرعت بندورة، زرعت قنبيط، زرعت باذنجان، زرعت فلفل، فاصوليا، فليفلي. أجا المستوطن قبل 3 أسابيع اطلق الغنم في الأرض ورعى كل الخضرة اللي أنا زرعتها، وهي الحين مرعية وقعدت بلا خضرة. مددت برضو الأرض هذه تفتوف وزرعت عليها قنبيط، ملفوف، خيار، باذنجان، زرعت كل أنواع الخضرة. وأجوا قلعوها، ما خلوش إلي ولا إشي. يعني في كمان غرفة هنا الولاد بناموا فيها، أجوا هدوها هدد كامل، كسروا القزاز، كسروا لي الغسالة، كسروا لي الغاز، كسروا الثلاجة، قصوا الكهرباء، قصوا المي، ما خلوش إلي. يعني دمروا دارنا دمار كامل. وطلعت في 20/10 أو 22/10 طلعت من بيتي، رحت سكنت في شعب البطن. هجروني من بيتي 3 أشهر، شهر 10 وشهر 12 وشهر 1. في أول 2 رجعت على بيتي، صرت أعمر من أول وجديد. بنيت الغرفة اللي هدوها، حطيت شبابيك، رجعت حطيت كهرباء، حطيت مي. بس الحمام الشمسي راح، ما قدرتش أحطه، بدي مصاري، ما قدرتش. أجوا على الدار بالتركترون وحاولوا إنهم بدهم يدعسوا جوزه وهو راعي معي الأغنام، وصار يفزع الحقوني الحقوني. طلعنا إلا التركترون بذيك فيه بده يدعس ويدعس الغنم. طلعوا الأولاد رجموا عليه، راحوا شكوا، جابوا الشرطة للأولاد وأخذوهم، ضربوا جوزي ونام ليلة في السجن. ثاني يوم طلع بكفالة ب1000 شيكل. ضربوا أولاد 2 واعتقلوهم 20 يوم وهم في السجن، ودفعوا 10,000 شيكل كفالة، وحطوا عليهم تك ممنوع يدخلوا إسرائيل، إن فتحت وانسكرت ممنوع يدخلوا في إسرائيل من مرة، لا محمد ولا مؤيد ولا مهند ولا شيادي، ممنوع ولا واحد فيهم يدخل إسرائيل. برضو إحنا بشر بدنا نعيش، فيش إن دعم من برا بيجينا اللي نصرف، بدنا إن احتياجات خاصة، إن بدنا نصرف، بدنا نشتري احتياجات مش قادرين يعني نجيبها. مشاكلنا كثيرة، مش وبيجوا علينا، بيجونا يعني في النهار بيجوا، في الليل بيجوا. احنا لو من نشطاء بيجوا عندنا وعايشين معانا منقدرش نقعد ولا دقيقة في بيتنا. طابون اللي بخبز فيه رغيف الخبز هدوه كسروه، ورجعت سويته من أول وجديد. الزوايا تاعت الزريعة سرقوهن، كان مصدر رزقي من أن أبيع خيار، أبيع بندورة، أبيع كوسة. فراح يعني الحين ما فيش. احنا يعني الناس بتجيب لنا وبنصرف. يعني الواحد لو بده يمرض بده يروح على الدكتور، ما فيش معاه اللي يروح يدفع كشفيته للدكتور. يعني من الناس، إذا الناس أعطتنا من روح ما أعطتناش شيء، قاعدين عيشتنا يعني يعني على الآخر على الآخر مضغوطة، مش قادرين إن المستوطنين مش قادرين ناخذ حريتنا من مرة. هنا بدهم شيانا نظل لين من مرة، احنا شوك الحين في حلوقه.
So, one thing I wanted to share before we move on to in that. So when I was there, it was the month of Ramadan. I was there for a month in Ramadan. And it seemed like often when the settlers would come to harass was right before iftar, which is the dinner to break the fast of the day. So they would like intentionally come at that point to extend the fast. And then in the night when families could finally like eat and just be together, we were staying at a house that is located right next door to a fence of a settlement. And yeah, I was playing with a child, and she was like so proud to sing her ABCs, and like she got like halfway through and gasped because a laser was pointing right at her from the window. And that was this settler guy who would just sit out by the fence with his gun and use his gun lasers to point it into the house. So it was like, it's just this entrance into the house during a time of celebration, of togetherness, to just remind the families that they were there. So we're going to watch this video. It's about 15 minutes long, and then we'll take a 5-minute break for a heads up.
עם הסדר, בלי הסדר, מדינת ישראל חייבת לשלוט ביטחונית על כל השטח מערבית לירדן. זה תנאי הכרחי, וזה מתנגש עם רעיון הריבונות, מה לעשות?
The Israeli government's ambition for the Palestinian territories comes as no surprise to Hafez Harani. This Bedouin's farm is in Masafa Yatta, the West Bank, on the edge of the Negev desert, and on the front line of an Israeli land grab for years now. The 7th of October attacks turbocharged that process. We've been filming with the Haranis over the course of the last 14 months. Watched an empowered group of settlers next door move away from sticks and stones to assault rifles. The Harani's cousin shot in the stomach. The family and what's left of their farm now staring down the barrel of the gun. Hafez's mother bought this land after the family were evicted during what they call the Nakba in '48. He divides his life between farming and making sure they don't get displaced again. So, in 2006, for example, when the Israelis tried to build a separation wall here, it was Hafez on the vanguard of the protest. Now his son Hamoudi is the activist, fighting to keep this land. A fight that's about to get more violent than they could ever have imagined. It's the evening of the 30th of November 2022. Hamoudi and his brother Sami notice settlers on the edge of the village. The settlers are holding a demonstration on Palestinian territory. The army should intervene to stop it. Instead, they're standing guard. The brothers, with a rifle trained on them, confront the soldiers. The expansion of illegal settlements in this area started years ago, but this night, in 2022, is different. Benjamin Netanyahu is about to form a coalition government which includes extreme right-wing settlers. And with their men about to take key positions in cabinet, the settlers on the ground are emboldened. The following day, and the settlers' weapon of choice, sheep. A young settler from a nearby illegal outpost drives his herd deliberately onto the Harani's land. Hamoudi rings the Israeli police.
He's grazing his sheep. He's a settler and he's like grazing his sheep in my land.
These are the mechanics of a land grab. Claim the grazing ground as your own and try provoke a reaction.
No. I'll tell me. Okay.
Another settler arrives by way of reinforcement, as do the army.
This is the way how they can confiscate my land. So they will just say this is like a settler land is just grazing a jeep, right? Or not? I'm speaking the truth.
Where are you from?
I'm from Tuan here. This is my own land.
It's the Bedouin. What is this?
What?
It's Bedouin. You're Bedouin.
You don't know that?
You're Egypt.
You don't know?
You're Saudi Arabia. You're
No,
Jordan.
My grandparents.
Yeah.
My grandparents. They are
Your grandparents.
from the 48.
They're Palestinian.
From the Beersheba, yeah.
So you're Bedouin from Beersheba. So your place is Beersheba. Your place
Yes,
is
and this is
Beersheba.
the land that my grandparents were living in after you evict them from there.
Beersheba, it's 30 minutes from here by car.
By car, okay. But they were living down. Why you evict them from there?
Hafez Hamoudi's dad, the owner of the land, arrives.
יש הרבה תלונות במשטרה נגד הדבר הזה. כל הזמן מביא את האסון ומפסידים להכניס.
Hafez and Hamoudi know how this will play out, but still involve the Israeli authorities. A way at least of signalling to the settler that they're not taking this lying down.
This is a closed military. You need to go out of the area.
زي كل مرة إعلان منطقة عسكرية مغلقة وهسه لازم نطلع من الأرض وزي ما شايفين هاي.
Remember, we're filming this a year before the October attacks, back when there was at least a semblance of state-enforced fair play here. On October the 7th, 2023, 40 miles west of here, 1,200 people were killed by Hamas, hundreds taken hostage. Everything changed that day for everyone, including Hafez Hareni and his family.
After the 7th of October, everything changed really. Because, you know, the settlers, they start like ruling almost everything around here.
It's the 12th of October, 5 days after the Hamas attack.
The first time when they came with the bulldozer. We just like woke up, you know, and start like screaming, you know, what are you doing? They just like, okay, go back home, and they start just shooting, you know.
At one point, a settler in army fatigues appears to shoot directly at the Harenis and other unarmed activists.
They chased us, all the family, until the house here. You know, really, you know, I was really confused.
Hafez is pushed back into his house at gunpoint by both settlers and the police. The following day, the violence becomes even more extreme. Just after Friday prayers on the 13th, a settler comes down from the hill into the village. Hafez's nephew, Zakaria Adra, is shot point blank in the stomach. An incident broadcast around the world. He's just been released after spending 3 months in intensive care and has agreed to speak to us. The settler who shot him was using expanding bullets at the time.
هذه كانت يعني منطقية كانت تقريبا 9 في 9 يعني هيك كانت 9 سم 9 سم. بنكرياس قال لا مش كل بنكرياس شالوا الجهة بس المضار قمول.
According to his lawyer, the only consequences so far for the settler who shot Zakaria, he had his gun confiscated. We asked the Israeli police about this, but they refused to comment.
يقف بيننا وبين المستوطنين، المستوطن الجيش يعطي المستوطن حريته يشتغل زي ما بده، يلبس لبس جيش ويخش على الناس ويسوي اللي بده إياه.
The blurring of lines between the army and the settlers has been happening for years. Since October the 7th, that's gone into overdrive. A few miles from Hafez's farm, the start of a new illegal outpost. Trees planted in the names of fallen Israeli soldiers. Memorials that double as a land grab. We interview one of the leaders who doesn't want to give his name because he's been fighting in Gaza and another condition.
אני לא אוהב את הבתים של הערבים שם הוא נקודה אסטרטגית שמונעת מהערבים להשתלט על מדבר יהודה. פה דוד המלך הלך, פה הלכו האבות הקדושים, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הסתובבו פה, טיילו פה, כן? הארץ הזאת צריכה להיות של עם ישראל.
We ask about settler violence. According to this man, it doesn't exist.
אני לא מכיר יהודי שקם בבוקר ורוצה לעשות רע לפלסטינאים. מכיר פלסטינאים שקמו בבוקר והלכו לשחוט ילדים, תינוקות, הורים. זה אני מכיר. אני לא מכיר התנכלויות לערבים, אני גם לא מכיר פלסטינאים. יש פה ערבים, אין מדינה פלסטינית.
3 months on from October the 7th, we're back on Hafez's farm. According to him, settlers are now de facto law enforcement here.
I mean, October 7th until now, we can't even pass this part of the land. We can't go out just to come to graze our sheep, our goat here. And you can see they just put the Israeli flag right on our trees and on our land.
They've seized about 2 acres of his farm. A military watchtower has been built. The dry stone walls literally closing in on him.
Really, it's something make me so upset, and really, I worry about if they succeed just like to take over the land, because they have the power, just to do it.
Before we leave, Hamoudi, Hafez's son, wants to introduce us to someone. Khuda is a widow. She now spends every night sleeping in a cave with her family because she says her 14-year-old son and her animals have been attacked.
ليش صرتوا تناموا في صفاي؟
احنا مستوطنين بحوشوا.
شو بيجوا عليكم بالليل؟
بحوشوا بيجوا بالليل.
شو بسووا؟
ضربوا عيسى ومدة يومين زاد عن نصها أخذوا أجر 4 روس.
As the light fades, Hamoudi walks with them into the desert and to the cave where they'll sleep like their Bedouin ancestors before them.
من يوم المستوطنين هيك خربت الحياة بالمرة.
ليش بتحس إنه راح ترجع للدار بأمان وما يصير عليك إشي؟
دلوقتي يعني الحين ما إنها يعني هالوقت ما إلها أمان الدنيا من المستوطنين يعني
ما بتتوقع إنك ترجع زي الأول يكون في أمان وهيك؟
Since the October attacks, Khuda's world, just like Hamoudi's, is shrinking faster and faster. The space to make a home, to harbor hope, now reduced to a hole in the ground.
The last part that we want to talk about is just the how we are documenting this as to U.S. settlers, really wanting to make the connections between the ongoing systematic colonization of the so-called United States. Camila did a great job of kind of naming how manifest destiny was the guiding principle of settler colonization, which used Christianity as a political foundation to expand westward, just like Zionism uses Judaism as to further a political agenda. And so something that I just kept thinking about while we were there was the Homestead Act of 1862 in the United States. This incentivized and really encouraged poor white settlers to move west, to again do the dirty work of the United States government in westward expansion. So just like how settlers in Israel or Israeli settlers are doing the dirty work of the Israeli government to expand, it's the same thing. So it really just felt like everything that was happening, there was nothing unique about the settler colonial project. It was all just a replica, a modern day replica of US expansion. But now people have military grade equipment to do it. And the backing of like international social media presences and like Western media. So, and we see this, Israeli settlers are often people from across the world, a lot from the United States, with like no indigenous ties to the land. Actually, today I listened to a podcast. It's called the Upstream Podcast, and they have, I believe it was part 7 of their documenting on Palestine, and they talk about like what does indigeneity actually mean. So I highly recommend listening to that podcast. But yeah, often with no ties to the land, and also just people who really often need help in their own home countries. So as I mentioned, the dude who detained me had bullying tendencies. So this was only just brought out and encouraged deeper when he was recruited. And yeah, there's no healing in that. There's no healing for anyone in that. So I think like we can talk about the nuance of utilizing settlers who are in marginalized positions, but do have positions of privilege to be recruited, whether it is in the United States or Israeli settlers, to do that dirty work and be those unofficial henchmen of expansion projects. Also, that being said, the official military are also people in disadvantaged backgrounds. Here in the US, it's poor BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. In Israel, it's children. The official process to join the IOF, which is required by everyone, is 16, but the recruitment into it, the preparation into it starts at birth. And ultimately, this is to take indigenous lands for a nation state project.
Sorry. So we wanted to just show these 2 very famous paintings that were painted during the time of westward expansion on Turtle Island, called the United States. This one on the left is American Progress by John Gast, 1872. And as you can see, in both photos, you can see that the people heading this colonization are settlers. They're not in military fatigues. They are farmers, and they're taking over the land in these certain ways of destroying livelihood, bringing their own livestock, planting their own plants. And you can kind of see some parallels between the olive tree planting and the settlers bringing their own goats and sheep onto indigenous Palestinian land. And then here on the right is another one called The Western Course of Empire Takes Its Way, painted in 1861. And in this one, you can see even more clearly that the people heading this expansion, heading this colonization, are settlers, are not in military fatigues at all. And then these two photos are very iconic. People have probably seen these before, but just wanting to bring the parallels of settler colonialism on Turtle Island and settler colonialism in Palestine together. This one on the left side was from the failed attempted extermination of the wild bison on this land. You can see that these are settlers who are very proud of all of the bison that they killed. And as most people know, this was a very strategic way of destroying cultural, a very important cultural aspect of Indigenous peoples in these areas, but also livelihood. This is what they relied on for food and for products that they made. And I actually thought a lot about this picture and about this attempted extermination of the wild bison when I was in Palestine, because I was seeing all these, I didn't see any olive groves burned, but we do have a video of that in a minute. But the intentional destruction of livelihoods and cultural connections to the land, basically. So the destroying of olive groves, the destroying of people's livestock like goats and sheep's legs being broken, which are things that happened before we got there. The planting of olive trees on Indigenous land. And then on the right-hand side, as you can see, this is the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. It was one of the biggest boarding schools on Turtle Island. And as I hope most people know, the boarding schools cut Indigenous children's hair. They punished them for speaking their own language and tried to purge that out of them. And there was a lot of sexual violence. A lot of bodies of children have been found on these areas. And this just kind of systematic indoctrination and trying to civilize people that are deemed uncivilized. And the parallels between that and ways that Palestinian children and just Palestinians have been treated. As I mentioned earlier, the burning of olive groves is a huge part of the settler violence in the West Bank. Olives are a cultural staple for Indigenous Palestinians, and they're also many people's livelihoods. So this is a quick, I think, couple-minute video.
There's not much to harvest off the West Bank's olive trees this year. There's been no rain, and Israel diverts underground water to illegal settlements, making it hard for Palestinian farmers to compensate.
Product quality is affected when we are prevented from entering our lands for cleaning, weeding and to take care of our plants. It turns into semi-desertified land and olive trees become weak since we can't clean around them. We can't feed them with fertilizer.
The Al-Mathloum family farms just a dozen or so meters from an illegal Israeli settlement. They say settlers have sometimes thrown stones and tried to stop them from carrying out the harvest. This Palestinian village is surrounded by the ever-expanding illegal settlements. Israel says security concerns mean they must manage access to many olive groves, but that stops Palestinians from making a living and forces them to find work elsewhere. And if Palestinians don't give up farming, Some settlers just set the olive trees on fire.
They are watching us, they're laughing.
The mayor of one West Bank district says settlers and soldiers watched for hours as volunteers battled a fire here 3 weeks ago.
Because when the settlers come, the soldiers can protect them. For this case, we couldn't, the soldier, we have to stay here. This is our area, they should go out.
Burning olive trees is a common settler tactic, because what happens afterwards is that when the Palestinians try and plant new trees, the Israeli military usually stops them. So then the settlers say, well, the land is abandoned, so we're going to build here. Of course, under international law, it's irrelevant whether there are olive trees on here or not. Israel is illegally occupying this land. The Romans were the first to cultivate olives here. For thousands of years, this fertile land has provided food and income for the families that work it. But if the settlers have their way, there'll be nothing left for the next generation of Palestinians to farm. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, in the occupied West Bank.
Really quick, Taylor, I just kind of wanted to bring it back to the last video, the Harani family that was shown in the longer video we showed. Actually, a couple days ago, were replanting some of their olive groves that had been destroyed. So they were replanting small olive trees, and they were detained by the IOF for 3 hours, and then they gave up. So, I mean, it's just continuous harassment and violence.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about Wyoming. We are Wyoming for Palestine, but we do want to make some connections between the wall of apartheid in the West Bank that goes around the whole entirety of the West Bank to the US-Mexico border. The next part will be just a little bit about the US-Mexico border. I spend part of my summers there with a group called No Más Muertes, No More Deaths. So this information comes mostly from experience on the ground there. But just general information, the United States has had the US-Mexico border all the way starting back at the FDR administration, but then really became a thing under NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, creating border towns, segregation, violence, just ultimately border surveillance culture, and very different than like the US Canada border, obviously, or of course. And then the wall of apartheid in Palestine around the West Bank was started in 2002 and directly modeled after the US-Mexico border. And really, borders are there to constrain and diminish Palestinian lands and peoples, or Palestinian peoples and land, and then also indigenous people here on Turtle Island. In Arizona, the Tohono O'odham Nation has multiple reservations. Their biggest one, the Tohono O'odham Reservation. They have part of it is in Mexico, part of it is in the United States. So, and the wall goes, or the border goes straight through, and then there's different points of entry into the nation. Complete breach on sovereignty, and then also often tribal members are like deported from the US to the Mexico side when they're like US citizens and tribal citizens. So similar to this wall in Palestine, there is a direct violation of sovereignty. There's also, as borders, the physical wall is an inherent problem. There's also checkpoints. At the US-Mexico border, these checkpoints often increase the mileage for migrants to cross up to like 80 miles. And also just increased profiling and policing. In Palestine, these checkpoints are everywhere. As Carissa mentioned, that Palestinians have to take Palestinian roads. When they do get onto settler roads, they have to go through a series of checkpoints. Everyone does. But the Palestinians are the ones who are racially profiled and often have to get out of their car and give documentation. Whereas every time that we went through with an Israeli activist, we were able to just go straight through. This is the same experience when I'm in Arizona. When we pass these checkpoints, we usually station a white person to be a driver so that we don't get stopped. Or we always get stopped, but so we don't get searched. I have never not seen a brown person driving their car not get searched. Like they're always, yeah, it's a double negative. I've always seen brown people's cars get searched if they're going through a checkpoint in Arizona. And then these are some pictures of the wall in Arizona. To the left is Baba Kivri, and that is a huge site of, or a path of migration in a route, and it's right on the nation's reservation, or it's on like the border of it, and yeah, it's just this site. It's a sacred site for the Tohono O'odham peoples. And it's just been desecrated today by militarization of the area. In the summers when it's so hot, it's like 110 degrees. It's like, unfortunately, we find a body like every week or so. So it's just a lot. And then this right side picture is the wall. And you can see that there's like a little hole, and that's where the construction companies that were contracted to work on the wall came together. Often these contractors get in like heat, like political heat, so they abandon their project, or there's like political strife, and things are deemed unconstitutional, so the contract breaks. So these two contracted companies that come together, they don't have the same materials. So now there's like a hole. So I just see this picture every time and I'm like, this is all fake. This is all human made. But in the US, unless you live close to a border town, whether it be like in Texas or Arizona or California, you don't really have to see this border culture. Especially for like white settlers, we don't see it. We don't really know about it. And then it's also not really talked about. Whereas in Palestine, it's everywhere. So everyone is seeing it. So the settlers included, because there's checkpoints everywhere. The border is everywhere. So there's a different level of, I don't know if cognitive dissonance is the word, of just seeing this militarization everywhere. But it's definitely just like baked into your mind. Yeah, and also just some other similarities. There's such strong connections between, not just in terms of like these tactics of borders, but the trainings and equipment and prisons and detention centers. Elbit is an Israeli company that provides most of the military grade technology at the US-Mexico border. Something that has also been on my mind, and every time a Israeli settler teenager would like drive their dirt bike around the house, it was just, those dirt bikes are so loud. And last summer in Tucson, I noticed Border Patrol there got dirt bikes, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen them on dirt bikes before. And my comrade was like, oh yeah, those are new. It seems like they're functioning just like helicopters, where they come, they locate where migrants are, often using like infrared technology or just seeing them, see it's a group of people, and since they're so loud, they just go right next to them or over them in the helicopter or the dirt bikes. And since they're loud, they scatter people. They don't actually stop then to detain anyone. Usually they just go on, but then people are scattered and without their group. And that like level of sound, that fear in the sounds just felt so similar. That we hear these dirt bikes every single day just driving around these houses. So all so intertwined, just these mind tactics. Yeah, and then prisons. I think also this really goes to, this presentation is about the West Bank, but we can't forget to just like name how Gaza is not just an open air prison, but concentration camp, death camp, based on carceral ideas. So with that, we're a volunteer group. We don't have like all of the time or capabilities to do some deep research into what is happening between the trainings and carceral nature of Wyoming specifically. But there have been a lot of reports and documentation of specific trainings and sharing of weapons and technology between various police departments in the United States. And we do want further research about what is actually happening in Wyoming, but for now, just the research that we've done, if you just do a few sleuthings on the interwebs of the Wyoming Department of Corrections, they have trainings run by ACADIS. And you look up, okay, who's ACADIS? Their parent company is Vector Solutions, and they have on their website who their investors are, and that's Norwest Venture Partners, which has offices in the US, India, and Israel. And Vector Solutions doesn't just do law enforcement trainings. They do all these trainings listed here, including like higher education and K through 12 education. So yeah, literally not just law enforcement. And Norwest Venture Partners, which funds them, has an Instagram, very pro-Israel Instagram. So yeah, really you can just see, like, even with just some simple research and Googling, it's all right there. So I think a thing that we get as a Wyoming organization, like, why are we talking about this? Like, we should be focusing on issues happening in Wyoming, and never going to deny those issues, except to say that it's all related. And focusing on Palestine takes that veil to unveils everything to show how everything is working together. And this is all intertwined. So we wanted to end, these are just some pictures of the border wall, the wall of apartheid. And this is in Bethlehem, so where Jesus was born. And there's resistance art, graffiti all over the wall. It's just so beautiful. And I think, yeah, and it's all, a lot of these, this art shows the parallels of struggle for liberation. So we have George Floyd down here on the right. We have Next Stop Mexico up here on the left. And yeah, I encourage you to read all of these little quotes.
So we just wanted to kind of have a slide about how to support. So I'll go through these kind of quickly, and people can go back to them and reference them in the recording. But social media, writing, you can write to your representatives, follow Palestinian journalists on the ground in the West Bank and in Gaza. You can join our coalition if you're in Wyoming. You can, I think the biggest one that I want to highlight, and I will have a slide about a particular movement initiative that is happening now, but you can go on a solidarity trip, and I will tell you how to hook up for that. I think half of the people here I know through this, but I will still include it. You can also talk to your family and friends. You can donate. There's lots of different ways to donate. ESIMs in Gaza, families in Gaza and the West Bank. There are some good organizations to donate to as well. And then just a little plug for the BDS movement. There is the bdsmovement.net website down there. Please go to it and find out more. But BDS stands for Boycott, Divest, and Sanction. And a lot of the university protests that have been happening recently are based in the BDS movement to get their universities to divest from Israel. This is Faza. So Faza is a initiative movement that has kind of come out of already existing solidarity movement groups that send internationals from the US, from Europe, from many different countries to the West Bank to do protective presence work like Taylor and I did. But Faza is trying to basically amplify what is already happening to get more people there to be a little bit more above ground. And I'll just read this quickly. Faza is based in Palestinian popular struggle and the grassroots organizing community that calls for action on the ground, intervention against Israeli violence in the West Bank through the organizing of large-scale international civil presence. Faza is a tradition of solidarity with the Palestinian people and is a call to respond to the current situation, working to facilitate intervention under direct Palestinian leadership. And I'm not going to read this other one, but it will be there in the recording for people to read. But basically, if you are interested, you can go to defendpalestine.org, which is the website at the top, and find out more. You can also email this faza.campaign@proton.me, but I would suggest if you are in the US, and I meant to put this on the slide, but I forgot, email Faza, so it's F-A-Z, a 3-A, and then it's US, so like the United States, at proton.me. So it's just Faza US at proton.me if you are interested in finding out more information or going on one of these solidarity trips. And then just a quick quote at the end: "The wall cannot separate the olive tree from its roots," from Raha Shadahaya. And land back from Turtle Island to Palestine, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Cool. And we have these sources. We will be uploading this to our website along with the recording. So the slides will be uploaded too.